distance in the light, vibration of a thundercloud.
Hello, loved ones. This is Matt Stevens, and this is the My Sober Addiction podcast, where we are happy, healthy, wealthy, and free. Yes, loved ones, I hope you're doing well. I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing really good, actually. I want to remind you of a quote that I mentioned a couple episodes back by Rumi, and it's the one where it says, "You are not a drop in the ocean, but you are the entire ocean in a drop." And all that really means is that when the all, or the creator, or God, your higher power, divided itself into however many billions of divine sparks that there are, one of which being you, it's not like it's divided into your 1/1,000,000th or whatever the number may be of that. No, that's not what that means. Because you are having an experience, and your higher power, or God, call it what you want. I call it the creator. The creator has poured its entire self into you to live out an experience, to have an experience of in this creation. So that's what it means when we say we're the entire ocean in a drop. It's all about you. And it's all about me. It's all about all of us. We are all equally important. We're all equally having an experience. There's that. I'm not really trying to get into that quote. I mean, it's fine. I just wanted to kind of plant that, put that into your mind. It is relevant to a lot of things we talk about here. So I recently did a YouTube video, and in it, I had mentioned how life for every one of us had been hard. And what I mean by that is, in most of our lives, we have had to deal with a lot of suffering, a lot of hardship, in a lot of cases, abuse, be it physical abuse, mental, emotional, whatever. Maybe it was when in our childhoods, maybe it was neglect. There's lots of different hardships that we could have suffered throughout our lives. When we're here talking about addiction, in a lot of cases, our hardship began well before addiction. In a lot of cases, the drugs were introduced into our life as a means of covering up the pain, covering up the hardships, or the abuse, or the neglect, or whatever it is. There's a lot of reasons why people turn to drugs to cover up their pain, to cope with just a crappy life, cope with a lot of different things. Everybody has their reasons for whatever that they've done. Most of your drug addicts didn't start out using because they were partying. That's not how a lot of drug addictions begin. Sure, it does happen, but most drug addictions begin because they're using it as a means of coping with fill in the blanks. With regards to life being hard, life had to be hard. It had to be hard to cause us to seek, to begin searching in earnest for reasons for it all, for healing, and ultimately for understanding. Because if life had been easy, if life had just been a walk in the park, a cakewalk, whatever you want to call it, if life had been easy, then we would have never had any need to seek for higher truths. We would have not had a need to seek for some sort of understanding, some sort of answers, some sort of healing. There would have been nothing to heal. So we should appreciate those hard times in our lives. And I don't mean that we should be glad we suffered them. No, but appreciate what they have done. Because in a lot of cases, they build a lot of character. And I know that, especially in the context of my sober addiction, I understand that we're talking about how in a lot of cases, our hardships led us to addiction, which then compounded our hardships and it compounded how bad things got. Of course, we never intended for that to be that way. Nobody ever set out to be an addict. Nobody started using drugs saying, yeah, I'm going to do this, and in a year from now, I'm going to be living in my car or in hotel rooms and hustling for dope every day. That's not what anybody ever set out to do. That's into those. That is obviously what happened. Now did that. So that great drug that we were using to cope with all that crappy stuff that was going on in our lives, did it make things better? Absolutely not. It just made things worse. But at least we were numb to it, right? At least we were numb until the throes of addiction set in, until we got all the way down the spiral to where we were down at the bottom of it and just churning. That's when we have nothing else to turn to. That's when we're sitting there. It's like, well, life's been crappy. There's been a lot of abuse or neglect or whatever. And so I turned to drugs, and that worked for a while. But then that ruined my life too. So now here I am at the bottom of the spiral, just churning and churning. Now what? Now what do I do? Well, that's when in a lot of cases we find religion. And religion works. Religion's fine. Except that religion, in a lot of ways, it kind of lets us down at some point. But it's not for nothing, though, because religion is ran by people. And these are people who are also flawed, just like the rest of us. But these are also people who have their own agendas and pre-programmed beliefs. But at least they instill some sort of hope in us that there is something outside of us. There is something bigger than we are. There is a higher power or a God, whatever. So if it sounded like I was about to poo-poo religion, well, I'm not. I'm by no means religious, very spiritual, but I understand that religion brings people to spirituality. And some people stay with their religion and they're happy there, and that's great. But then there are some of us who it served a great purpose in that it showed us that there is something bigger than we are. So kind of like if life had been easy and everything was just super smooth, we would have never had any reason to look outside ourselves. But since we do have a reason to look outside ourselves, we begin a spiritual journey. And then it's, well, hello, spiritual awakening. What is a spiritual awakening? Well, that can be a little bit of a complicated subject. And that's kind of what I want to talk about. Spiritual awakening, first of all, it is not an event. It's not a moment in time where we have this big aha moment and it's like, oh, wow, I am spiritually awakened now. No. It's also not a process. Because a process implies, at least to me, it implies that there is a beginning of the journey. And there is a moment when you do begin it. But a process implies that there are steps that you take, and after you complete the steps, it's finished. Well, that would also be like the aha moment. That would be the event. And again, we never really finish a spiritual awakening. So a spiritual awakening is a state of being. When we begin a spiritual awakening, it's when we start looking, we start looking for answers. And the best part is that's when we really start to find them. But we never fully are spiritually awakened, at least not in this lifetime. We could discuss whether or not that it is, and outside of this, fine. How are we supposed to know? But during our spiritual awakening, that's when we discover our true selves, our higher selves. That's when we connect to our source. Call it God, call it the Creator. But that's when we create that connection to the source, and we realize that we have come from something much larger than we are. And man, is it a relief, isn't it? It's such a relief to know that this isn't all there is. Because if there were, well, I don't know. I'm just glad that that's not the case. I don't even want to go down the road of what if, because it doesn't even matter anyway, because I'm 100% certain that this is not all there is. In fact, I'm 100% certain that you are so much larger than just what you see. Your higher self. And some people can debate on whether or not the higher self is the creator or is the I don't know. We can debate that. Is there a fine line between your higher self and the creator? Maybe there's a fine line between the two. A lot of times it's debated whether or not you are the creator. And that's when it gets a little bit of a funny little gray area too. Kind of getting back to Rumi's quote about how you are not a drop in the ocean. You are the ocean in a drop. That quote applies to all of us. But what it means to me is, if we're looking at it from the perspective of our higher power, from the perspective of the creator, it means that the creator is 100% invested in you and invested in your experience. From my understanding, from reading the Kabbalion and other spiritual works, the creator created all of this, and then in an attempt, or I shouldn't say in an attempt, and then so that it can experience its own creation, explore its creation, explore its own self. It began having experiences through me, through you, through everybody. That's another subject for another time. So when we do begin our spiritual awakening, and we discover that connection to the source, we discover that connection to our higher power, that's when we feel very empowered, and as well we should. Because like a lot of times on this podcast, I talk a lot about reality creation and how to manifest the life of your dreams and things like that. And while I know that the creator is going to experience every single possible experience there could be to experience in this universe, so that means there are going to be some negative ones. But that, and that's unfortunate, but that doesn't mean that I have to be the one to experience it, or you. Another little part of this whole thing is some people refer to it as the veil of forgetfulness. And what that's about is, it's like, well, okay, Matt, if I'm so powerful, if I have my higher self and I'm immortal and I'm outside of this and I'm connected to the source and I'm able to create just like God, except on a smaller scale, of course, but, nonetheless, still be a creator of that sort, then why all the suffering? Why did I come here and have all this crappy stuff? Why did I have all this abuse, all this neglect, all this fill in the blanks? Why did I experience all of these things? Well, that's when we got to introduce the thing that a lot of people call, quote unquote, the veil of forgetfulness. What that means is when we come into this life, we have no memory of our true nature. We have no memory of our true self. But that's necessary for discovery and growth and experience. It's necessary for us to come into this completely blind. It's necessary for us to come in not knowing who we are, not knowing our true power, not knowing that we are connected to the creator of all of this. It's completely necessary for us to do that. And then to go through whatever we got to go through so that we do finally begin to look outside of ourselves and look for answers, look for some kind of truth, some kind of help, some kind of healing. And that's when we eventually come full circle and right back to the source. And that's when we realize who we truly are. But if we'd come into this life knowing all of that, well, then there'd be nothing to learn. There'd be no experience to gain. We'd have already known it all. And then that would pretty much be meaningless for all of this. We can talk about that all day long. But what really matters here, what really matters is that in this lifetime, things are hard. Obviously not because we want them to be, but because they necessarily have to be. Things have to be hard, because if they weren't, then we wouldn't go searching for answers. We wouldn't go searching for something bigger. I'm not saying that you should appreciate the abuse and neglect and whatever other hardships you've dealt with in your life. I'm not saying that you should be glad those things happened. I'm not going to patronize you like that. But I am saying that we do need to appreciate the fact that something happened that caused us to grow. I mean, you do see it out there. You see people out there who've, and I'm not going to judge, but there are people out there who've never really had a hardship, and they're completely oblivious to anything bigger than themselves. The only thing they see is the material world right in front of them. That kind of sucks. Maybe not to them, maybe because they don't realize, they don't know what they don't know. And I guess that's a good thing in those cases, right? Because if they don't know what they don't know, then they don't know. But we do know that there is more to this than just us. There is more to this than this material world. There's a lot to learn, and there's a lot to discover. And what happens after this, I don't know, but I can tell you this. I do believe that this lifetime is preparing us for something. I do believe that this lifetime is kind of a crash course in getting it together. This lifetime is a crash course in learning to be creators, learning to cope with emotions, learning who we truly are, learning who our higher self, learning that we are connected to the source. And when we leave this life, what are we gonna do after this? I don't know, but I gotta believe it's pretty awesome. I gotta believe it's gonna be very exciting, because this lifetime, with all of the suffering, it can't be for nothing. I've heard it, and I've talked about this on the podcast before too. And I don't know how true this is, but it is a nice thought anyway. Just humor me for a minute. So apparently the universe is just chock full of billions upon billions or trillions or whatever of souls, some of which will sign up to come and have a lifetime or have a series of lifetimes or whatever on Earth, in this realm. And others will be like, oh no, I'm not going there. There's entirely too much suffering and violence and all of that there. But then there's those of us who do come. And apparently, according to this theory, we are admired because of our courage to come here and have this experience, because it is one of the hardest places to have a lifetime. It's just a nice little thought. We've talked about this a lot too. I do know that as beautiful as Earth and as life is, it can be equally as horrific and violent and scary. The levels of extremes are huge. I mean, that's putting it mildly. So, anywho, dear loved one, I'm going to sum it up by saying this. When you look back on all of the things that you've been through, maybe don't look at it with resentment or with disgust or dread. Definitely be grateful that you made it through. And definitely understand that may have been necessary to bring you to where you are. That all that may have been necessary to cause you to grow. And I'm being real careful, because I understand that some people have dealt with some abuse that is so horrific, I would never even mention it. It's unthinkable. Some of the things that people have been through in their lifetimes. So I'm being real careful not to sit here and act like you need to just be grateful that happened to you. No. But if those things did happen to you, understand that those things happened because it was leading you to something. It was leading you to something bigger than you, something bigger than all of this, something more important, a higher mission, a higher purpose, your higher self. Every experience that could possibly be experienced is here. Every experience that could possibly be experienced is being experienced by some of us. But the good news is that we understand. We come out of it knowing our true power. We come out of it knowing that not only can I get past all that, but I can go the other extreme. I can go the other direction. Like in the Kabbalion, it talks about polarity. like the differences between love and hate. It's two sides of the same stick. There's really no hate. It's just less love. Because at what point on the meter, on the scale, does it transition from love to hate? It's a very blurry thing. Like if you're at love and then below that is either less love or more hate. And then below that is even more less love or even more hate. So the scale, the difference between love and hate, it's the same thing, just a difference in degree. Hot and cold, same thing. Up and down, same thing. At what point does hot become cold? If something is 100 degrees, okay, fine, we'll say that's hot. But 99 degrees is still hot, but it's less hot or it's more cold. It's either less hot or more cold, but it's still the same scale. I believe that that's one of the many lessons that we've come here to learn. So anyway, loved ones, I have been doing more on the YouTube lately. It's been a lot of fun. Shorter things there. And the podcast is there also. YouTube finally got an actual podcast platform where before we would just kind of convert the audio files to a video and just play it over on a regular, as a regular video. But now YouTube has it to where it's actual audio podcasting on there. So there's that. I don't get very many views or listens there, but that's fine because most of mine come from iHeartRadio and Apple Podcast and Spotify. Anyway, loved ones, I just wanted to talk about that because that whole thing with spiritual awakening, it really has been on my mind a lot lately. And sometimes it gets a little frustrating to think that, well, so you mean I'm never going to be spiritually awakened? Well, I mean, I guess I can't. I'm not the authority on this thing. I guess I can't say you never will. But I can say with a reasonable amount of confidence that you probably won't be in this lifetime. Your higher self may be spiritually awakened. And maybe that's why you're having this experience. So that you can see what it's like to not be spiritually awakened and then to begin the process. I don't know. That could be part of it. But the whole thing about spiritual awakening has been on my mind a lot lately. I couldn't tell you why exactly, but I do know one thing. It's not an event. It's not something that just bang is going to happen. And it's also not something that is a process. It is purely a state of being. That much I am absolutely certain of. When we begin spiritual awakening, we enter a state of being. And that's where we stay. It's one of those situations where you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. Once you go there, you're there. I know that since I began my spiritual awakening, I can't imagine ever going back. I can't imagine ever not being in this state. But maybe, I guess, I don't know. It would probably, if at all possible for that to happen, it would probably include falling off the wagon and relapsing or something. I don't know. That's probably what it would take. But anyway, so loved ones, if you have not yet, please check out the YouTube. Please give me a subscribe there. I've been checking out a lot of to do with the live streams on there, and I think that is really cool. I'm going to start working towards doing that also in addition to the podcast. The podcast a little more structured. Live streams seem like they're probably not so much unless you're doing a presentation. In that case, yeah. But there's that. And then on the Substack, also, on the Substack, I've been posting, I don't want to say sporadically, but I've been doing a lot more writing on other things such as memoir rather than blog posts on Substack. But I have got some new ones on Substack nonetheless. So if you're interested in reading some things that I've written, go to substack.com or get the app and just find Matt Stevens. And also I have a chat feature on the, to do with the podcast. It's pretty simple. It's right there in the description of of each individual show. If there's a question that you would like to ask, or if there's something you would like for me to touch on, or if you got an idea for an episode, or if you've even got a guest idea. I don't do a whole lot of guests. I've only had Kitty on here, and that was just once, and I'm about to bring her back on again here in the next very, very soon. But I'm not opposed to interviewing people. I'm not opposed to having guests. It's just not something that I have done. But I've always kept it kind of in the back pocket that that's something that is going to happen. But anyway, if you've got an idea, if you'd like to be a guest, hit me up on there. So anyway, loved ones, that's what I got. I love you, and I will be back directly.
There is